This might look nice, but this is the cheapest, the literal cheapest flooring you can possibly get. It's not real wood. It's not even LVP. It's that sheet, that rolled vinyl. It's just a sheet of vinyl. The question I got the most is, why am I replacing my floors? And there are multiple reasons. We don't mind the color. We actually kind of liked it. It's not our first choice, obviously, because it's not what we chose. But this house was built fairly cheap. And you can tell because it's just super builder grade everywhere. For example, you can see the creases. Do you see that line right there? That would not be visible if there were planks down. If it was hardwood or if it was even vinyl planks like I'm gonna put down, that's gonna disappear. But look at this. It's literally peeling up. But this is what I was talking about. It's not even planks or anything. It's literally just that sheet vinyl, rolled vinyl, sheet vinyl, I don't know what it's called. But the good news is that I don't have to take it up. I can just put flooring right on top of it. So here's the flooring. It is Lifeproof flooring with a 30 mil wear layer, which is one of the thickest wear layers you can get. And I got it in Dusk Cherry. We bought this house in summer 2022, and ever since we moved in, we have wanted to redo the flooring. But I had to pump the brakes just a little bit because before I could do that, I had to address a couple issues first. This floor is extremely creaky. So I took about an hour walking around the house, and anywhere I found a creak, I would sink a screw down into the floor joist. It was probably the worst in the kitchen, and I sunk like 20 screws just in this area. I wasn't able to totally get rid of it, but it is significantly lesser now, and I'm fine with that. Now, I know that I could have just taken off the quarter round and left the baseboards. I could have refloored and then put quarter round back down, but I hate these baseboards. I think they're hideous. I think they're too short for my 9-foot ceilings and the vaulted ceilings in the living room. And I have a personal vendetta against quarter round in new builds. There, in my opinion, is no reason to have quarter round in a new build. So I'm tearing all of this out. I'm gonna refloor, and then I'm gonna replace all of the baseboards with more modern baseboards and no quarter round. It took a few hours before I was finally able to start flooring, but I started with the fireplace because I knew this was going to be the hardest spot. I didn't want to scribe around the rock, so instead I chiseled out a 1/4 inch groove underneath the fireplace, and this allowed the plank to slide totally underneath it, and in my opinion gave a much cleaner look than scribing it. Before you start flooring, definitely make sure the floor is totally clean. Don't just sweep. You definitely should use a vacuum, and I recommend re-vacuuming every 5 to 10 feet of flooring because there's just going to be more stuff and crud that gets on the floor. You're going to want to maintain a 1/4 inch gap between the flooring and the walls. Yes, LVP does move, and trust me, I have seen it. I've actually been in a house where they did not leave a proper expansion gap, and all of the flooring was buckled at every single seam between the boards. That happened at my friend's house, and he's livid, and now he literally has to refloor his house after just a few years. So I started by laying out the first 3 rows by the fireplace, but in order for it to fit flush, I have to trim about 1 inch off the first row. Now when I place those boards back, I can scoot it in to slide underneath the fireplace, and it left absolutely no gaps, and I'll tell you, it looks fantastic. I'm really proud of that one. One of my favorite parts about using this LVP from Lifeproof is that you can cut it with just a normal utility knife. I recommend not using a tape measure, but instead flipping the board around and then marking the end of the board where you need to cut it. Then you just use a normal utility knife, you score across it using a speed square, and then you snap it over your knee and you can place that board down. I'd say the main benefits of cutting with a utility knife are: 1, you don't have to get up to make cuts, you can just do them right where you are. And 2, when you're using a saw, you make a lot of particles that just get everywhere messy and dirty, and then you just have to vacuum more regularly. So snapping it with the utility knife, you don't make any mess, and it just goes a lot faster. It's a lot cleaner of an installation. And when you don't have any obstacles or anything complicated to work around, it goes really, really fast. A common obstacle you'll run into while flooring are door jams, because you want the LVP to go underneath the door jam, so you're gonna have to undercut that. So just use your multi-tool on top of a scrap piece of flooring to cut it just barely above flush, and then you'll be able to slide the piece of flooring under and keep flooring, just as you're seeing with both of these doorways. I had a challenge, or a goal rather, to finish this flooring from start to finish in just 3 days. Because redoing the floors in your entire house is one of those things that just like uproots your life. Because you have nails and flooring and saws and power tools everywhere, and having kids at home with all of that is just dangerous, and they can't play anywhere, so it's a whole fiasco.
Another one of the few power tools I recommend is a jigsaw. It's really good for cutting these complicated cuts on the LVP. It leaves a nice clean cut and you can be super accurate, so your cuts are too. Anyways, back to the story. Instead of dealing with a house that's kind of in disarray, my wife instead took the kids to her parents' house for a few days so I could have a few days to dedicate to the flooring and hopefully have it completely done before they get back. And at this point, I'll just say that it was not done in a few days. It was not live-in ready. I realized earlier while moving my furniture that the fridge, the dishwasher, and the stove could wait until I got to the kitchen, because then I could simply move them onto the flooring I've already done, and then once I get done with the kitchen, I can move them back. That also meant that my fridge was still plugged in just in the living room, so none of my food went bad, and I was still able to use it while I was flooring. And moving back those appliances was a big testament to me personally of how durable this flooring really is. I didn't use the dolly again, I just drug it across and it left no marks at all. No dents, no scratches, nothing. On Monday when I started this job, it wasn't till about 3 o'clock that I was able to start actually flooring, because up until then I was removing baseboards and fixing the creaky floor. So now it's Wednesday at 3 o'clock and I am just hammering in the last few boards at the base of the stairs. And that's a super exciting moment because it finally meant I was done with flooring, but now it's time for baseboards, which I definitely underestimated. I painted the baseboards before installing because in my opinion, it's easier to touch up paint than to mask and paint all of the baseboards after installed. So I actually painted 3 at a time throughout the day, but it wasn't until nighttime that I was actually able to start installing them. The new baseboards are 1x8s, which are actually 11/16 by 7 1/4. This is the recommended height for a baseboard if you have a 9-foot ceiling. Pro tip, your knee pads have grippy parts and they don't work if you're kneeling sideways. The only additional or different part of installing baseboard behind the toilet is that you're gonna wanna caulk before you put the toilet back on instead of at the same time you're caulking everything else. It would be much harder to do if the toilet's already installed. And when that was done, I put on the new wax ring and bolts for the toilet, and then I put the toilet back on. I know they have rubber rings now, but in my opinion, they're just a little bit harder to get perfect, and the wax rings are super forgiving, so I'm just gonna stick with wax. So my pro tip about doing baseboards is to assemble the corners first and then slide it into place. So as I'm doing baseboards, I have 2 nailers. I have a 16 gauge finish nailer and an 18 gauge brad nailer, and the brad nailer nails these corners together. I slide it into place, and then I'll nail it to the wall. You'll have much more uniform gapping, and overall it'll just be a better outcome. Then I finished caulking all the rest of the baseboards, and the next step would be to touch up with the paint. But to be honest with you, I just didn't want to. I was exhausted and I figured I'll just do that in like a couple months or something. So I didn't. I'll wait, I'll do that later. But it still looks done.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't it crazy? Yeah, what do you think, Lev?
Yeah. It's a completely different house.
Yeah.
It looks so good.
Yeah.
I thought you.
It's really hard to believe that I'm done. This took 4 days to finish, and I thought it was gonna take 3. My oversight was not in the flooring, it was actually the baseboards. I thought the baseboards were gonna take 1 day, including taking off and putting back on. It was 2 days, so full extra day doing baseboards. And I am exhausted after all of this, but I mean, look how amazing this is. I know I'm gonna get asked this, but this is Dusk Cherry Lifeproof flooring sold at Home Depot. I could not be happier with basically everything about it. Obviously, number one is the color. This is beautiful. This is exactly what our home needs. More rich, more warm, lighter, brighter tones than that dark brown. 2, installing this was the easiest flooring I have ever had to install. I mean, one person did 1,100 square feet in 2 days. That tells you something. 2 days, 1,100 square feet, and this is not a simple flooring installation. With the kitchen island, the laundry room, with this stupid little pillar thing, a small half bath. I mean, or actually no, that's a full bath. I have moved the stove, the dishwasher, the fridge. I've had a workbench over here, garbage can, been throwing stuff all over the floor. Not a single scratch. After talking with them, that's apparently something that they were really focusing on. Well, I mean, it's life-proof flooring, so obviously that is like their number one goal. I've never had a flooring this resilient. My last flooring, anything touched it, scratched. Deeply, it was so bad. If you're gonna redo your flooring in your house, definitely go with Lifeproof. I've done multiple different types of flooring at this point. This was by far my favorite in basically every single aspect. And this color is gorgeous. This dust cherry, I'm in love with it. Now I want to make my house livable again. So I would like to have a couch, I'd like to have a dining table, and I would like to have a house again. And I also want to do laundry. So I'm gonna start moving back all the furniture and the appliances.